Necessity is the mother of invention, and rather than wait for years of research and development, troops in need of specific firearms would often take matters into their own hands. Soldiers in the First World War were generally issued with bolt-action rifles, which were fantastic at long-range shooting, but a major disadvantage in the confines of a trench system, urban fighting, or close range in general. If there was one nation that took the idea of improvised weapons and ran with it, it would be Russia. The Eastern Front didn't have the same protracted trench warfare of the Western Front, but they found another reason to cut weapons down to more manageable sizes. Partisans, bandits, revolutionaries, and even peasants who wanted to protect themselves had need for weapons that could easily be hidden away from prying eyes. The main rifle of the Russian forces was the Mosin Nagant, a very reliable and popular but lengthy rifle. With pistols difficult to acquire, the Mosin Nagant was repurposed. Called Obrez, the Russian word for cutback, these weapons had no standard shape or size. Their form based on whatever their creator needed or had the ability to make without destroying the gun in the process. These could be simple modifications like cutting down the barrel, turning the rifle into a carbine, or cutting the weapon back so much that it was nothing more than a bolt-action pistol. Though shortened, the Obrez guns made from the Mosin Nagant were still chambered in the powerful 7.62 by 54mm R cartridge. The recoil would be intense, and the Obrez lacked a front sight, making accuracy beyond a few paces wishful thinking rather than something that could be counted on. In spite of their limitations, though, they would be frequently used by all sides in the civil wars and independence movements that gripped the Russian Empire and burgeoning Soviet Union, easily hidden under floorboards, inside of chimneys, or concealed under a long coat until needed. Though the Mosin Nagant was the most common, there were other rifles that were modified in this way, like the German Mausers and Japanese Arasakas, and whatever else happened to be available at the time. On the Western Front, the fighting was dominated by trench fighting, where the standard-issue rifles were too long to be effective in the confines of a trench. To remedy this, weapons like pistols were used, but these weren't always available. To compensate for this, the soldiers would remove their bayonets from their rifles and use them as knives, use entrenching tools as melee weapons, and sometimes make their own weapons that wouldn't seem out of place on a medieval battlefield. Clubs made from furniture legs or other pieces of wood and studded with nails or wrapped in barbed wire. Brass knuckles with an attached knife blade, maces, and even billhooks made their appearance on otherwise modern battlefields, which even caused some soldiers to wear improvised metal armor, something more at home at Agincourt than the late 20th century. Though these melee weapons were used, soldiers wanted something more robust. With pistols in short supply, and unwilling to wait for the high command to issue them proper trench fighting gear, they took the firearms they did have access to and made some modifications. These changes weren't made by professional gunsmiths, but desperate soldiers with a hacksaw. One method to end the perpetual stalemate would be to dig tunnels under no man's land beneath the enemy's trenches. The end of the tunnel would be filled with explosives and then set off, destroying the defenses from below. The diggers could encounter the enemy underground digging their own tunnels. Fights would be fierce, with both sides slugging it out in the subterranean battlefield. Rifles were useless in this environment, so the soldiers used pistols, entrenching tools, and other close-quarter weapons. On at least one occasion, a rifle was used, but not in a way consistent with regulations. There is evidence to suggest that the use of at least one British SMLE that had been cut down to a fraction of its length. Details are scarce, but it appears as though it was used by Canadian sappers near Ypres. The weapon's barrel had been cut back considerably, extending only a few inches past the receiver, making it a little over 2 feet in length overall. It lacked a bayonet mount or front sight, which was cut away with the rest of the barrel. One can only speculate on the accuracy and range of the weapon, but in the close confines of the tunnels, this wasn't a concern. Fights in the tunnels were vicious, but brief. The winning side, the one that could bring more force to bear quickly, and the cut-down rifle would give a little bit more of an edge in initial firepower. It could mean the difference between living and dying. Of course, modifying a rifle like this was strictly prohibited by the authorities, but something as unimportant as rules and regulations did nothing to stop those determined to survive another day in the trenches. More than likely, this particular SMLE had already been damaged beyond repair or lost its sights, and anyway, what the brass didn't know wouldn't hurt them. Across the lines, the Germans also used their own cut-down weapons. The Maxim 0818 is an unusual submachine gun, a no-frills cut-down version of the MG08. Beyond that, there's very little information. It was, apparently at least, fed from a multi-row en-bloc clip, and though based on the MG08, it only fired 9mm parabellum cartridges. From the limited number of pictures available, there's no doubt about the improvised nature of the weapon. It's little more than a simple wooden stock and 2 pistol grips mounted on the receiver and a short barrel. Any further information about the weapon is unknown, like the rate of fire, number produced, effective range, accuracy, reliability, if they saw field combat, or anything else. Even the name is unknown. The title Maxim 0818 is given because firearm experts don't have any better label for it, and some simply call it the SMG 0818. Its existence, however, shows the priority that was placed on cut-down improvised weapons in the First World War. The Americans also wasted no time in learning the lessons of the conflict. While there are no reports of shortened Springfield M1903s, the Doughboys did modify other guns for trench warfare. Shotguns already successfully used in the Philippines to pacify the insurgency there were utilized to devastating effect against the Germans. Capable of firing impressive spreads of buckshot at close quarters, these trench guns were already much shorter than the standard rifles. The soldiers that used them modified the trench sweepers even further by sawing down the barrel to an even more compact size. These weapons were brutally effective and famously caused the Germans to officially protest against their use. The Americans, for the most part, ignored the threats of reprisals and continued to use them until the end of the war. Even after the war, the Obrez concept gained a mythical status and would be used in the Spanish Civil War, World War II, and beyond, and are a popular collector's item even today by firearms enthusiasts. For the most part, Obrez guns are bolt-action rifles, though other types have been cut down as well. Other semi-automatic rifles, submachine guns, shotguns, and pretty much anything else have been cut back from their original size, being easier to conceal or fitting a specific circumstance. Even today, unusual improvised Obrez-style guns are still being used. In what can only be described as a Frankenstein gun, a Soviet PPS H-41, their standard submachine gun of the Second World War, was recently found in Iraq. Its wooden stock was cut so that the stock's curve was converted into a pistol grip, and the barrel was reduced to a hand's width from the receiver. More unusual, the weapon was rechambered to fire 9x19mm parabellum, and it was adapted to fit German MP40 magazines. It's small enough to fire with one hand, but like all Obrez-style guns, the recoil must be immense, and firing on full auto one-handed is likely to create a major health hazard. It just goes to show that on the battlefield, a little ingenuity and access to a hacksaw goes a long way.